So I accidentally gave Ollie the better paper that's meant for watercolors, and I painted on the thick sketchbook paper. Painting the background where I realized that this paper is sketchbook paper and watercolor paper. Yeah, with all the splotchiness, but it actually mellows out later. Not sure why or how.
Now I know why. Did you know watercolor paper can expire? I didn't. And it was until I started using this sketchbook, which is the Arteza Cold Press 88 page of premium watercolor paper, that I realized watercolor paper can expire. And I have 3 of these left. Luckily, my husband likes to use pastels. That's something that he just learned. And pastels work pretty well in this sketchbook because it doesn't really use water like watercolors. But I also found a way to fix this expired sizing issues when watercolor paper does go bad. So, what causes watercolor paper to go bad? There's a couple of things. I recently learned that heat and humidity is one of the causes, especially humidity, because on the surface of this paper, well, in any watercolor paper in general, they have something called sizing, and sizing is usually made from gelatin. Gelatin is water soluble, so a lot of water and heat causes humidity, and that just slowly dissolves away the gelatin. And if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've done science, gelatin should be a protein of some sort, and protein does denature with heat. So heat and water, bad for watercolor paper. So the reason why I keep showing this sketchbook out of everything is this was the one that made me realize that watercolor paper can expire. And there's a couple of things that you look out for when you suspect that. So at the start, when I first started using this, I did take this to Australia. It was one of my smaller square sketchbooks, and I didn't want to lug around a lot of sketchbooks. I have like 4 drawers full of sketchbooks on my left here, in those IKEA Alexa drawers. Yeah, so I didn't want to lug it around, especially since I was travel nursing. But I did this first page when I was in Australia, and the colors are vibrant. It spreads on the paper nicely, and I can mix pretty well. I didn't touch the sketchbook for a long time, and I did some pencil drawings, blah blah blah. I did some swatches, and then I came back to New Zealand. So the thing about Australia is that it is scorching hot, especially in the west. That's where I was located for half of my nursing journey, and it can be very humid in places by the sea, which includes Victoria, where I was based near the sea. And I threw the sketchbook into my bag just like any other person. I didn't realize paper could expire until I came back to New Zealand, and I noticed a few things. So when I was drawing this piece here, I felt I was really fighting against the paper. Everything I popped down wouldn't work. Although this piece looks a bit vibrant in the camera, it's actually really dull in real life. I have trouble distincting the gray rocks here from the water because it just blends all together, and there's no tonal value at all. And that's one thing that you should look out for when you suspect your watercolor paper is expiring, because what's happening is that the particles are not sitting on top of the paper and letting the light pass through it. It's actually being absorbed too fast into the paper, and so light can't pass through it, making it really, really dull. And I think the lighting with the one up there and the one down there is making this piece looks brighter than what it is in real life. Then over the page, initially I thought it was because this was smooth paper, because in this sketchbook there is two types of paper. So one side is rough like that, and that side works a little bit better, and then the other side is completely smooth, and that's the side that I often have trouble with. So this is on smooth side. If you look here, a lot of the swatches do feather out, and that usually is because the pigments are being absorbed into the paper fibers too fast. And when that happens, let me find it. Oh, this is also an example of when paint absorbs too fast into the paper fibers, so it feathers out like that. And I had a hard time using just my regular pigment liners on this paper, and I thought it was because I haven't drawn in a long time. I honestly thought it was partially skill issue when this happened, but now I realized it could be because of the paper. Here. So this is when the pigment absorbs too fast into the paper and it just sits there, and no matter what you do to try to get this pigment to move, like mixing onto the paper and manipulating it, it won't budge. It's stuck there permanently. Another example is when you can see color from the previous page coming through. So this blue here, that's the color from this previous page, which I had a lot of issue trying to do, and I gave up halfway because I was fighting so hard against this paper. This is the Mortuum sketchbook. It's also starting to expire, and so on this piece here at the back you see all the splotchiness. That is from signs that this paper is about to expire quickly. And I didn't fully realize something was happening until I went to do urban sketching with my husband. I was trying to do this piece and I just couldn't, like, the watercolor was not moving whatsoever. And you see this, and you can see the paper texture where I put paint instead of the nice and lovely watercolor texture, like the granulation, like the front page. And it's so dull because all that pigment just sinks into the paper. So one way to fix this issue is to use sizing solution. I don't have any sizing solution, and I don't think I would deliberately go out of my way to buy sizing solution. However, I do have this. So I purchased this because I saw all these fun reviews of people painting onto plastic and then doing watercolor stuff on it, and it looks like real watercolor. It's almost like liquid watercolor paper. So I use this to basically fix the sizing. This one is in titanium white. You can get it in other colors too. I think there's a lighter white one that Daniel Smith does, but sizing solution is transparent. So if you don't want white because your paper is cream, then I think the sizing solution is much better. So when I resized this paper with the watercolor grounds, I didn't realize that I should have put it on quite thinly because I was so used to putting this on plastic and whatnot where there isn't any paper. So I popped this on this page quite thick. You can already see the difference with the green. It does pop out a bit more and not as dull, but then these colors are a bit dull. I think it could be just how I applied the grounds, and you can see all the texture to it because it was really thick. It's almost like gesso. But what made me happy is that I was able to mix the yellow and blue here and make a lovely green in between without having issues manipulating that color on the paper. So I think it works. I just need a little bit of trial and error on how to use the watercolor ground.
So you can test if your watercolor paper is expired by simply putting water on the paper, and you'll see that the paper sucks in that water really fast and becomes dry. And you can even see some speckling effects. Yeah, so all that water that I've just put on is already dry, it's gone. Whereas watercolor paper that hasn't expired, the water should just stay on and sit on top for a while. So people who stretch their watercolor paper can also find this happening too, because like I said, too much water can denature all that gelatin and make the watercolor paper go bad. So the water is still sitting there nicely. And I'm just gonna grab some paint and you can see speckling effects on the side already, and it's already causing that hard edge that it shouldn't on watercolor paper. So basically this paper without sizing is just paper. And then same thing on this. Grab the same color. And let it dry a little bit. And that hard edge isn't there. And you can get rid of hard edges too easily. That you can't with this one. And you can see all the paper fibers as well that are outlined with the pigment. So this side I have resized with the Daniel Smith watercolor grounds. It's just next to this one that's really thick, but I love the texture on it. So I'm just going to show what it looks like. So the watercolor does sit on the paper, which is great. I found with the watercolor grounds, it actually caused the watercolors to take longer to dry because it sits longer on top of the paper. And like before, I'm gonna add some water around it. So I'm still getting that hard edge, but it's not as bad as before. And you could tell automatically that this purple was a lot more vibrant than previously. So this is the same purple as this one here. And you can see it's more vibrant. Not just because I use more pigment, but you can see more of that pink coming through. And the hard edges isn't too bad there, but you can still see the paper fibers. And at least now I can still use the sketchbook for watercolors for what it's meant to
before sketching.
So what did I take away from this? I learned to store my watercolor papers correctly, otherwise I shouldn't hoard too much paper. Maybe now you can be less hard on yourself, and sometimes it really is just the paper.